Casson. All right. And we're live. Where have all the solo tackles gone? That more this week on IDP Blitz with John Norton. John, where have all the solo tackles gone?
Well, apparently we're turning them all into assists these days. We've talked about this trend a little bit in the past of all the scoring system or the scoring scorekeepers at the different stadiums being very different, and one team will have 50 assists a game, another team will have 15. We're starting to see a trend towards a lot more assists being awarded than solo tackles. For example, 5 years ago, the average for a team was about 45 solo stops and 15 to 20 assists. Through 5 games this year, there are 10 teams averaging below 40 solo tackles being awarded. 20 teams are averaging more than 20 assists. And the Eagles are completely upside down with 36 tackles and 38.8 assists per week on average. And no position is showing this trend more evidently than the defensive line. I caught this when I was doing my column earlier this year. Last year, you might remember 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the golden mark for a defensive lineman was 40 solo tackles and double-digit sacks. Last year, Jonathan Allen was the only defensive lineman to reach the 40 solo tackle mark. So it's maybe a situation where we need to start thinking as commissioners about maybe revamping our scoring systems a little bit. Normally, your tackle is a point or a point and a half, and your assist is half of whatever your tackle is. And we may need to readdress that a little bit in order if we're going to try to keep our balance going with our positional balance and so forth in our leagues. Just something to keep an eye on. It doesn't really have an effect on value for one player versus another because they're all getting more assists than what they get. So it doesn't really change the value of the players individually, but it's something we need to start thinking about as far as balance from position to position, from offense to defense and so forth.
Absolutely. And for IDP commissioners out there, more the better. The leagues where you start one of every position, one defensive lineman, one linebacker, one defensive back, this just de-emphasizes them even further. And it's another reason to try to start a full defense.
You need to start at least 8 defensive players if you're going to use IDPs, at least 8.
Yep. That's a commandment. Put it on the tablet. Down from the mountain. Okay, more down from the mountain from the guru. At one time, the Dallas Cowboys looked like they were set at linebacker for a long time with Leighton Vander Esch and Jaylon Smith. They may be set at linebacker, but what happened to those two guys?
Well, it's just been a very strange path that we've followed with these guys. Jaylon Smith is now lining up for Green Bay. Well, he's actually sitting on the bench for Green Bay last week. We'll see if that changes any this week. So we thought with him being cut that would provide more opportunity for Leighton Vander Esch. Didn't really work out that way. We were kind of expecting to see an uptick in playing time. He hasn't been playing anywhere near full time recently. He didn't play anywhere near full time in week 5 either, which was a little bit surprising. Neither did Keanu Neal. So both of these two guys basically split time almost evenly. I think Neal might have got a few more plays. But so basically what they're doing is they're playing Vander Esch as the second linebacker in running situations, and they're playing Neal in passing situations, and they're going with extra defensive backs as their base package. So neither one of those guys is really going to have enough opportunity unless something changes there. Even with, earlier we were kind of waiting to see if one of these guys got traded and figuring that might save us, and it's not looking like it's going to make much difference. Smith went to Green Bay. Excuse me. Didn't play it immediately. Obviously just traded there, so he really doesn't know anything about the system. That wasn't much of a surprise. What was a little bit of a surprise is we heard a little bit from Dallas this week about why Jaylon Smith was cut. And we kind of read into the picture that they're got too many guys at the position. He's making a lot of money, got a big contract and all that stuff. Well, according to what came out yesterday, I believe it was on Tuesday, he was cut strictly for performance reasons. He graded out poorly on every game so far but one, and they just decided that it was time to part ways with him. You have to believe that money had something to do with it. When you got a guy making that much money and he's not performing, that just makes it that much more enticing to let him go, let somebody else pick up that salary. So we'll have to see if he can kickstart his career in Green Bay and where we go from there. But right now I'm not holding my breath for him to start ahead of anybody there this week, even as their number 2 guy. He might get in front of Chris Barnes, but eventually, but I don't expect to see that happen right away.
Where we go from there on this show is to the cover boy, Zach Cunningham, once an IDP stud. What do we have if we have Cunningham now?
You have somebody on the tail end of your bench that you might be looking to replace shortly, or at the very least, you need to set him out this week. Had pretty poor outing, first couple games, didn't really do much. They played 100% of the snaps the first week. Second week, he was down to 70%. Sat out a week because he was banged up, came back this past week and played about half the snaps. I don't know if this is injury related, that maybe he's not all the way back, but Camus Grugier Hill played 100% of the snaps opposite Christian Kirksey there. So Cunningham had his snap count reduced. He's in a different situation than what he was in before. He was a inside linebacker in a 3-4. Now they've got him playing on the weak side in a 4-3. Not sure if that's a good fit for him, or maybe there's something going on there. But the bottom line is, even though he was back on the field this week, his snap count was significantly lower than what it needs to be for him to be a factor for us in IDP. He did have the one good game a couple weeks ago. But at this point, I would be very nervous about putting him in my lineup for this week. And he is definitely somebody we need to have on our watch list for this week.
Let's talk about a few linebackers we might not be nervous about putting in our lineup to replace some of these guys we expected production from. Let's start with Cleveland. There were a lot of players. John, at the beginning of the year, there were a lot of players vying for snaps. Linebacker in Cleveland, some got hurt, sorted itself out that the second-round pick, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, may have something there that's lasting right away in IDP leagues.
Yeah, this was very interesting. We saw these guys splitting snaps. Nobody was getting much more than 40 or 50% of the snaps over the first 4 games. This past week, they had Owusu-Koramoah played 91% of the snaps. And they also got Anthony Walker back from injured reserve. His first game back plugged him in at 73% of the snaps. And everybody else got just a trickle or maybe a bone thrown to them here or there, a couple plays, but none of the other linebackers played any kind of significant snap totals. So maybe we've seen Cleveland kind of turn the corner and pick their 2 guys that are going to be their main 2 linebackers. For a lot of years we got used to seeing Christian Kirksey and Joe Schobert as the 2 guys on there. Both of those guys putting up good numbers together. So we might get back to something along those lines where we are seeing 2 Cleveland linebackers with enough playing time. We know there's enough opportunity there for both of them to put up decent numbers. Very optimistic that we will see a rise for both of these guys going forward.
And we'll get to watch Owusu-Koramoah chase Kyler Murray this week, so that at least he has the athleticism in the linebacker core to mirror him. One of my favorite guys coming in, and John, you have him listed as a replacement, but I wonder if David Long could become a starter. I remember in the playoff win over the Ravens in 2020, he was outstanding. Rashaan Evans, Jaylon Brown have never been totally sold on either of those guys. What do we have for the short term and maybe for the long term in Long?
Well, David Long is a guy that is definitely on my ad list this week. I'm trying to pick him up every place that I can get him. Mostly because Jaylon Brown landed on IR this week. But even before that, Long came in and played. I think he made 4 or 5 starts at the end of last season, put up good numbers in just about all those. Yeah, he's playing very well. He might be the long-term replacement for Jaylon Brown. They had talked about possibly trying to find a replacement. Jaylon Brown is not a player that apparently Tennessee is sold on either. They did like him a little bit better than Rashaan Evans, whose snap count was really trash this last week. I think he only played 40-some% of the snap, and we've been seeing less and less of him. Even going back to last year, he wasn't playing anywhere near full time. So I would not be at all surprised if David Long winds up being the replacement, the starter for the rest of this year and very possibly into the future with him. I had 10 solo tackles last week. I think 10 solos and 2 assists, if I'm not mistaken. He's a good player. He's a good player, and he's in a very good situation, even if he's not a great player, that we can take advantage of those types of opportunities as IDP managers. And I think he can put up some good numbers for us going down the stretch.
Again, looking for potential pickups. All rivers return to the source. Jamie Collins always returns to New England. But does he return to IDP value in New England?
Well, it's always a tough call when you're talking about New England because you never know what you're going to expect. He may put up 12 tackles this week, and next week he may be inactive. You never know what the way they sway back and forth on players so much. What we do know, he goes back to New England for his third stint with them. He knows the system inside and out. He can step right in and play anywhere that they need him to. He can play all three linebacker positions. He can play four linebacker, but he can play the edge if they decide that they want him out there. He can get after the passer. He's a big play threat. The question there is going to be, is he going to get enough playing time to give us any consistent numbers? And that remains to be seen going forward. You know, for an example of what he's capable of, he played 3 snaps last week and he had a tackle, an assist, and a sack. I mean, the tackle and the sack were on the same play. You get awarded a sack and a tackle for making that play. But in 3 plays, he had a sack and an assist. So we know the guy can put up the numbers. The potential is definitely there. It's just a matter. Last year they were skimpy on linebackers because they had guys out. They had guys on COVID. They had all kinds of issues. We saw a lot of 3 safeties. They're still using a lot of 3 safeties even now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. If you're hurting at the linebacker position, I would snap him up and stash him on the back of my roster this week just to see what happens.
One last one before we go. And remember, folks, you can always get all of John Norton's great IDP content, Eyes of the Guru, projections, and more at footballguys.com as a subscriber. All of that great IDP team. Remember to like this video, comment, subscribe. We appreciate all of y'all coming over here, fans of the IDP podcast. Now we got the IDP Blitz on Wednesday afternoons. We appreciate your support. Speaking of support, if you're looking for somebody at defensive end, do we have a legitimate trend here with Everson Griffin, who's showing up in the backfield a lot?
I've always liked Everson Griffin. I've always thought he was a pretty good player. I don't know if he is just fired up because he's getting an opportunity to come back and prove himself again with the Vikings, but whatever's making him tick. The guy has 4 sacks in the last 3 games. He started off 3 games ago as the third man in the rotation. I think he played something like 36 snaps, got a sack. 2 weeks ago, he got a much bigger portion of the playing time, had another sack. This past week, he actually got in the starting lineup again, played 72% of the snaps, I believe it was, recorded 2 sacks. So it looks like the dynamic duo of Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin are back. How long that lasts is hard to say. He's got a little bit tougher matchup this week as far as getting to the quarterback, but he's a guy that would definitely be at the top of my ad list if I was in need at the defensive end position this week.
I'm lucky enough to work with the dynamic duo of John Norton and Matt Schauf, who trade off weeks here on the IDP Blitz. So again, join us on Wednesday afternoons, and we're gonna. We know how long this will last. This will last all the way through the season, so we can help you win your IDP championship, folks. We want to be there for you always at Football Guys because you're so classy.